you have this sort of like shadow that's building up under America, where we are an utterly insane people. I mean, if you talk to enough foreigners, you'll come to realize Americans are kind of nuts in a very positive way.
Right.
And so we have this built-up tension that we don't really know how to relieve.
This is from Not the Bee, which at this point is like one of the more reputable outlets. These journos are getting a little out of control. Leftist gun group uses note written on bullets that killed Charlie Kirk to recruit students at Georgetown University. You guys probably saw this. Hey, fascist, catch. At Georgetown. At a university. Which people are the evil fascists? Yeah, very salient question. It was the John Brown Gun Club at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. is advertising for new members by using one of the phrases written on Charlie Kirk's assassin's bullet casing and proclaiming that they celebrate the death of Nazis. These are profoundly, profoundly evil people. If you know anything about the John Brown Gun Club, they are this, basically a leftist paramilitary, and they need to be cracked down on with the full force of the American government. But we're going to get Rudyard in. We're going to get him to talk about this, and it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful thing. Let's see if he's in here. Hey, Rudyard, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I think we're in business. Well, I imagine everyone knows you that's watching. You're obviously a friend of the show. But maybe for a few people that don't, could you give a quick introduction who you are and what you do?
Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me. And I'm Rudyard Lynch. I run the YouTube channel What If Alt Hist, which looks at the patterns in history to try to predict the future. I'm well known for my bet when I came on earlier here that America's on the verge of a new civil war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's a good bet looking at the direction we're heading in right now. I was leading into this interview with an article. It wasn't really an article. It was a tweet from Andrew Colvett. I don't know if you saw it. At Georgetown University, there was a flyer that said, "Hey, fascist, catch." And it was an advertisement for the John Brown Gun Club at Georgetown University. So you're seeing like open pamphleting on universities for recruitment for these leftist paramilitaries, because that's really what the John Brown Gun Club is. How do you even begin to tamp down on that? What does that say about the national environment that they're able to just put these posters up on universities, and supposedly Catholic University, Georgetown University? I mean, what's your take on all this?
This has been a long-standing thing we've seen gradually grow on the left, where it was really bad last spring, especially with people attacking Teslas and threats on Elon Musk. And that was my big tipping point. Well, when I saw that, because a lot of that leftist terrorism was very directly pushed on places like Reddit or left-wing blogs, where the left is fairly overt about this stuff, and they've been so for at least a year, where last winter there was a social media trend of young women saying they're going to wear cute little winter boots to cause terrorism. You need to buy your cute winter boots so that you can go out in the winter to cause terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been a long-standing leftist issue. And it's just gotten worse, and it'll continue to get worse until you put another variable to like stop this trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, yeah, because we saw in the 70s or the 60s and 70s where you had, Weather Underground, you had like the Black Liberation Front, whatever. You had a few of these leftist organizations, and they kind of operated with impunity to a large degree because a lot of those people are still out and about today, and they're walking free. So the precedent thus far for leftist violence has actually been, you can kind of get away with it. Maybe you spend a few years in jail, but there hasn't been a serious push from the government against it. And if anything, the intelligence agencies and the the IC in general has been oriented towards right wingers for the longest time.
Yeah.
So now Trump is reorienting back to the left, as he should. It's a bit slow. I mean, if we can't reorient this quickly, I mean, where are they going to stop? Like, it just seems like you're waking up every day now and there's another example of leftist violence.
One of the core issues I've seen in like the last year is the boomer cons have not woken up to how dangerous the left is. And most of the conservative facilities of power are still controlled by boomer cons, although Trump has shoved in a lot of millennials and Gen X's and some Gen Z.
Mm-hmm.
And waking up the boomer con of leftist terrorism seems very difficult. And one of the points James Burnham made in the 60s, which I thought was brilliant, he wrote a book that was prophetic called The Suicide of the West in 1961. And at the time, liberals believed in stuff like free speech or tolerance and all of these more freedom oriented things. And it's interesting to read that as a Gen Z because in the 21st century, that's just all gone. But the point the author makes is that every time the liberals or like the normie left wingers make a gain, they've enabled it for Marxism because they're totally incapable of pushing back against Marxism. They just go to the right. So everything the right loses will ultimately end up in the Marxist camp because the normie liberals are not organized or tough enough to really push back against the Marxists. So we've seen this creeping takeover of all of the West by Marxists due to this mechanism.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, because that's what you're seeing, where you're seeing these otherwise normie liberal pundits and politicians when they have to come out and condemn the Charlie Kirk assassination. To whatever the level of sincerity is not what I'm really discussing. I'm discussing the fact that every single time they will say political violence is wrong. This is sad that he died. And then they put a bunch of qualifiers onto it, but they're saying, but as you know, whatever his politics were, politics aside, like they're still cracking the door to the fact that like, no, your politics can actually get you hurt, and that's the way it should be. And that just shows that they're incapable of regulating everyone to the left of them. We're on the right. I mean, for better or for worse, it's actually quite easy for the normie, the like sort of center right, to regulate and sort of finger wag at the right. They do it quite frequently, although it's, you know, they're less so able to impose their will as the Republican Party shifts more to Trumpism. But still, the left, the normie liberals, like you're saying, they're just incapable of wrangling in the Marxists. They're terrified of them, and you're seeing this in their condemnations.
They have the left has a staggering absence of leadership. And when you see stuff like this, where just the mob psychology takes over, and whenever that happens, you get the worst possible outcome because mobs are several million years less advanced than individuals evolutionarily. And one of the benefits the right has over the left is that we can develop leaders a lot more easily, where Trump isn't the easiest example, but people are generally respective of Vance. And Kirk had a tremendous amount of respect when he was still alive. God bless. But with the right's ability to have leadership, it means we can control our own sort of mob psychology so we don't end up with the worst possible outcomes. It happens on the right. It doesn't happen. It happens like 5x as much on the left. And because the left can't have leadership, because they're so envious and so sort of crabs in the bucket, they just devolve into the worst aspects of mob think. Because you can't think of a single person who rose to real leadership on the left, where the reason they're putting up Biden, was born during World War II and the British Empire was the biggest nation on earth, is because they cannot generate leadership younger than him.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, I think also is just because right-wing philosophy is just kind of naturally hierarchical. And then like you pointed out, left-wing is just crabs in a pot. It's just equality for equality's sake. It makes it impossible for like a strong leader to get up there and really rally the troops. Something that has been concerning to see with these shooters is how like atomized and how they're basically just freaks. And you're seeing with a lot of these social trends among Zoomers, it's almost like American society is just like a repository for these types of figures. It's like it regularly produces these types of people, and then it really just comes down to a matter of like when, how, or why do they snap. That's really what it feels like.
Yeah. Part of the reason America has school shooters, and this is a multifaceted thing, I'm not going to say this is the only reason, is the ancestors of the school shooters were like the greatest conquerors in history. So you're taking the most successful conquerors in history, shoving them into a highly stable, highly bureaucratized, feminized society overnight. And you have this sort of like shadow that's building up under America, where we are an utterly insane people. I mean, if you talk to enough foreigners, you'll come to realize Americans are kind of nuts in a very positive way.
Right.
And so we have this built up tension that we don't really know how to release. And I definitely agree with you. It's before I came on in this show, I was thinking to myself, what does the recent Charlie Kirk and assassinations tell me I didn't know before? And it speaks to a certain trend where I predicted America would have a civil war like 5 years ago. I thought it would be like a normal historic civil war, like the Spanish, where you have the Marxists fighting the conservatives. But there's just the extra layer of madness here.
Hmm.
And that's just an unquantifiable thing
Yeah.
where people have just gone utterly crazy. And the line is still right and left, but there's also the sanity insanity line. And
Hmm.
sadly, there's more insane than sane.
Yeah, you just get this general feeling, and it wasn't like this growing up. I don't know if you felt this way, but you get this general,
No,
and we're both young. I mean, like I'm 24, but you get this general
same.
feeling of instability when you walk around, especially in cities, but even like a Walmart in a rural area. You get this feeling of like instability, and you get this feeling off of people of like kind of desperation and like in a way that they've given up. And that wasn't always that way, and that's just so un-American because Americans fundamentally, I love this description of Americans as they're temporarily embarrassed millionaires, where now it's like a country of just people that really feel like we're swirling the drain. And that's when people snap. It's a really horrifying thing. So I totally agree with your dichotomy. It's like, okay, it's still right and left in the classical sense, but yeah, you have the extra axis now of insane versus not insane, and it really makes it tough to sort of project what a civil strife could really look like.
Yeah. Um, it's I mean, a lot of you might have seen my Mouse Utopia video. I don't want to get into that now, but that's my best theory. I've also developed an idea called the psychological Black Death, and that was talking 2 years ago that we're going to start experiencing mental health pandemics in the same way centuries ago plagues would kill off people.
Mm.
But it's gonna get very strange. American politics might start looking like a sort of drug-induced fever dream.
Mm.
And the thing we have to keep in mind is that we know what truth and good is because the ancients had it for thousands of years. And
Hmm.
so we can choose to develop our society to ignore the insanity and sort of build a front against it rather than having it tear us apart.
Hmm. I mean, that's the tough thing is you have an entire okay. So like I was reading this new poll from Quinnipiac before you came on, where it was a majority of Americans now have given up on democracy. They don't believe in democracy. Granted, a lot of these people identified as people on the left, so they're just going to be upset about Trump being in office. But those numbers probably would have been swapped during the Biden years. Like it would have been the same, close to a majority. It would have just been people on the right that were upset. But then you had 75% of Americans saying they were very concerned about political violence. So it's like we're getting to this point where even Americans broadly kind of understand that this situation, we can't go on like this. Um, but it really just comes down to which people are insane enough to snap. Because I just don't see the right going kinetic anytime soon. I don't think there's an appetite for it. I don't think that the right has a large enough cohort of people that would be capable of sort of snapping in these ways. But I don't know. Maybe like Phil Labonte's on our night show, our Timcast IRL, he has this great point he makes is that the left views violence as a dial and that the right views violence as a switch that you just flip. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's tough to project going forward, but if the leftists keep committing attacks at this rate, do you think there is a point where the right just goes kinetic and puts this back in a box?
So I got this wrong before, and so I'm going to hold my L. And upon holding my L, um, it's I got this wrong before. So the thing that shocked me was how long this took. Where I don't fault myself for thinking it would happen in the last year. I frankly think it's strange things have lasted this long, and that could be for a variety of factors between aging or uh, I don't know, people being able to eat today, which they wouldn't in the previous years of history when things are bad. Um, but it does feel like things have been extended longer than they should have, where, again, you're right, it's circling the drain. And the question is, when is that going to happen and by what manner? And the current global order is like a Jenga tower. And with each, for those that don't know, Jenga is a game. You put up these wooden blocks, and then you take one block out until the tower falls down. And the amount of turns till the tower falls down is how you play Jenga, and you count. Uh, and so with each Jenga that gets pulled out in the global system, the equation itself changes. So if China invades Taiwan, that's going to ripple across the entire world. If France's government collapses, that's going to ripple across the entire world. And over the next 2 years, we're probably going to see at least like 3 or 4 Jengas get pulled out. And with each of them, the global order is going to change. And that changes everyone's baseline assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, one thing that's kind of interested me is the X Factor. I mean, this could be an American centric take, but the X Factor really does seem to be Trump because you look at countries like South Africa, countries like Brazil, countries that are built on like a Western, liberal democracy, at least something reminiscent of that, although there's obviously a lot of external factors in these countries. But you see how, by every account, they should have collapsed by now. And they still haven't. They still kind of run on fumes. The government still is able to use power in some ways, even if it's not super strong. And it makes you wonder, like with the current structure, with the current deployment of the global order, how do you even get these countries to collapse? It doesn't seem to be possible. And then that's why I say Trump's the only X factor, because he seems to be the only person that is able to single-handedly impose his will on the world order as far as the actual way that these societies are structured and shake them up. I don't know if you have any strong opinions on this.
The current order is going to collapse. I stand by that. It's just there's the only thing holding it together is entropy. If you look at the forces on each side of it, there's 10 forces for disintegration. And the thing that's holding the system together is a sort of bluff or a sort of myth. But then once that bluff gets called somewhere in the world, it's going to grow everywhere else. And that's a question of how and when, and I don't know. Keep in mind that as a historian, 10 years is short. So if this happens 5 years after I predicted, I'll still feel sort of vindicated in the long term, because you can look at a trend like this and know it's going to happen, but the timing's really difficult. And what's often the case, I find, and this is more of just like sort of a life lesson thing, is that a process will take forever to happen. You'll wonder if it's still going to happen. And then the second you question it, it happens. Where it's the whole thing of it's darkest before the dawn, or like the British airstrike on Germany was the worst. Sorry, the German airstrike on Britain was the worst right when the British were losing hope. So it could be a situation like that, or it could be something else I don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, it was weird in the U.S. because, like you were saying, I mean, I'd sort of felt like, okay, the left was demoralized well into the Trump administration, and yeah, you kind of almost dismissed them. It did feel like we were really winning, and then the Charlie Kirk shooting happens, and it's a huge gut punch, and then the bluff is called. The bluff, which was civil discourse, was called because you saw the other side's reaction to the shooting. No one could give a full-throated condemnation, and then you had a large chunk of the left just openly celebrating the attack. And it felt like that was something that was kind of integral to the United States. It's kind of integral to a republic, is people participating in the culture of free speech and like civil discourse and these sorts of things. And that was shattered overnight. And a lot of these, normies, boomers that you're referring to, I think even a lot of them saw that and went, oh, wait, they're not just wanting to sit down and debate. Like they actually feel that way. Okay. As kind of a wake up call. I mean, I don't know if you got a sense of that.
Yeah, the left, I have a principle called Lynch's law that no matter how mentally unwell you imagine the left to be, they're worse. The more you study into their psychology, the more you see of their behavior, you will consistently realize their mental health is worse than you thought. And so I knew that going in. And the scary thing is that, I mean, the left operates within sort of like a degree of plausible deniability at all times. But Hassan and Destiny were not fully dismissive of the death of Charlie Kirk, which should have been the easiest thing ever.
It's a layup. Yeah.
And that's just deeply concerning because they're two of the biggest leftist accounts. And it speaks to something I think a lot of normies liked the left, because the left came across as peaceful and nice and trying to fix things in the safest way. And then you see what's underneath that, and it's utter bloodlust, way worse. The left is easily more bloodthirsty than even the most right-wing factions of the left. Or you'd have to pick the most far right to meet even something significantly more mainstream on the left. And that's a huge collapse of illusions, because on top of it, the left runs all the institutions, so or the vast majority of them. And so it makes your average normie realize, wait, maybe an insane death cult is in charge of society.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the terminology I've been using, is death cult, because it seems so cliche, right? It's like, okay, yeah, people have been saying that for years, but there's not really a much better way to describe what's going on besides this kind of underlying bloodlust that comes to the surface more often than not these days. Because like you look across the West, you look at like the UK, it's kind of obvious what the flashpoint's going to be. There's going to be immigration because that seems to be what really animates things, and it's having a tremendous impact on the country. But the United States, there's like a variety of places this could really pop off. I mean, immigration is one. That's kind of what buoyed Trump in 2016. But there's a lot of different points in the American sort of political sphere that could really set things off. And yeah, I mean, when it comes to the leftist bloodlust, I mean, you look at the only way to really get on top of this, because you're not gonna debate your way out of this, is you're gonna have to use the full force of the federal government and crack down on these people, and then from there, who knows where it could go. I mean, I personally think that you have to act as soon as possible to get a lid on this, but I don't know. But it seems like no matter what, they accuse the Trump administration of being this like fascist authoritarian government. And so, of course, they're going to react as if they're fighting a fascist authoritarian government because that's what they genuinely believe. They genuinely believe these things.
It's pretty horrifying that the mainstream leftist media, no, I like the live stream better. The left stream media, they've been calling Trump a Nazi for years, and that he's going to take over totalitarian power and all those things. And their messaging since the 2010s has been punch a Nazi, violence against Nazis acceptable. So you can see the trajectory that's going on there, and it doesn't end well. And they've thrown away all of their moderate, sane people who would tell them no. The issues with the No Kings protest and the National Guard being sent in to deal with that felt like it was sort of the most plausible start to a war. And we've consistently seen things where Trump recently said he wants to put National Guards in every major city. And when I see that, I just think that's a tinderbox because it radically increases the space of friction. What I mean by that is that if there's American troops in these major leftist cities and they're wandering around, for the leftist elite, that's a very obvious affront on their sense of the world because these tend to be people who only think about their personal lives and then they extrapolate their theories into politics. So if you have National Guard in major cities, that radically increases the space of friction because you'll have these soldiers who may or may not be loyal to the left constantly interfacing with these radical leftists in a bunch of places at once. And that's just kindling. It's just a lot of sort of matches being dropped in a very dry forest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we discussed it. We touched on it earlier. Obviously these attacks are being carried out by young men, and we're seeing an increase in atomization of young men. You've covered this, at length on with your work. What factor are young men going to play as the civil strife increases? How do you keep these guys from snapping?
Yeah, it's also funny. I didn't realize there were this many aggressive young men on the left.
Right.
Because that's been the consistent aggressive young white men on the left.
Right.
Because that's been a consistent theme. I think the current one got into it through like weird forms of trans porn.
Yeah. Many such cases.
That's a meme.
Right.
That's a meme.
Sure.
And I do not mean to speak lightly of a tragedy, but the ridiculous and the reality are merging together because our lives are the internet.
Yeah.
So as the internet becomes more ridiculous, reality gets more ridiculous. But it's weird to see these young men fighting for the left because I don't know, young white men, I don't know what incentive you'd have to do that. But I mean, if the left is already cultivating mental illness as a coalition strategy, I guess that's a good one in the current society. Or it's a profitable one.
Right, yeah.
And so for young men, if there's going to be a war or civil strife, that would sort of radically increase their social value because both the right and the left would have to pander to young men to give them an incentive to fight. Mm-hmm. And that might create weird social effects because you've moved from an ecosystem where the society gives young men no status to one where both sides have to pander to young men. And I can't see if there's a civil war that there wouldn't be some variety of draft, either by the right or the left. I think you could draft Americans to fight each other, but not other countries at this point. The problem then becomes elites are drafting armies of young men who don't even like them, where I think if you got an army of 20-something-year-old young white men to fight for the left, their ideological version of leftism would hate the mainstream NBC, CNN leftists.
Yeah.
And so this creates a different disjoint. And it's there's also the potential for, I mean, if the men don't get paid, if there's some breakdowns in authority of like Chinese bandit warlords, and it's just lots of man, the story's getting so strange. I don't know what else to say. We're just here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like you're seeing this dichotomy with young white guys. It's like you have two paths. Either you look at like the photos from the Charlie Kirk memorial, and it was like a bunch of white guys like had their lives together by all accounts. Like they're, you know, they look normal, right? They're like wearing normal clothes, probably have fairly functional social lives. And then you juxtapose that with the left, where it's like the only time a young white man is celebrated on the left is if he's martyred himself in some way. Like you see with the Aaron Bushnell, remember that guy that lit himself on fire for Palestine? I can't believe I remembered his name. He was venerated, and then these shooters to a degree are venerated. And it's like, that's the only time you ever actually see them celebrating a young white guy is if he kills himself for the movement. And that's a really, really bad thing. That's like a death cult territory, as we were hitting on earlier.
Yes. The way I can, so there's two ways the left holds on to young white men. One of which, and for the DNC people who spent $20 million for a research project, you can just listen to this. First thing is through mental illness. And the thing with Tyler Robinson is that Salt Lake City is a mostly conservative place, but there are elements of Salt Lake City that are as progressive as Seattle or Portland that are just utterly insane. Mm-hmm. And so he was part of that subculture, or at least adjacent to it. And then on top of it, so mental illness is the first way, and the left predates on mental illness. They find you for they'll pick one of your mental health vulnerability points and then sucker you in to greater degrees of paranoia. And then the second one is through people who I call ethnically leftist, where in the Middle East you'll have, if you're born in Egypt, you're going to be Sunni. If you're born in Persia, you're going to be Shia. And then if you're born in Boston, even if you're dispositionally conservative, if you have more masculine character traits, you're like more responsible, you can still be a leftist, because if you're born into Boston, it's just, you will never hear a conservative argument.
True.
And so these are the two demographics of young white men I think the left can hold on to. And on top of the people who are ethnically leftist, what happens if you work at like a major hospital in Washington, D.C., and all of your coworkers are left-wing? It's just a lot easier to be left-wing, where we've hit a threshold where the right and left are different societies and different civilizations that work under their own rules.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very petrifying.
Yeah.
I have one. I'm not gonna put you on the spot and make you give a prediction, but maybe a projection through the next 6 months of what to look out for. I think that gives a lot of breathing room of just what should we be looking out for? What would be some bad indicators, or what would be some good indicators?
Let me make up something good. There's several variables that should happen at some point, and I don't know when they should. China's angling after Taiwan. There's the American politics. I think there's a natural flashpoint over immigration. I've said several different things. That's my current bet for most likely to cause a civil conflict. Another issue I have looking at is I don't know how the average American is going to keep paying their bills, because the economy just keeps getting worse. And there has to be a threshold where cost of living goes up, people can't get jobs, where you just hit a tipping point. And I don't know what's going to happen when there's so many variables like aging or the economy or I don't know, like recession, that just keep going on longer than his system can sort of hold out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Dude, yeah, this is going to be a wild, just through the end of the year, this is going to be a wild time. Yeah, there's I don't know what off ramps are left, but let's take one ASAP. Where can people find you if they want more? They're gonna want more, but where?
Thank you. You're very kind. Go to What If Alt Hist on YouTube, or my second channel, History 102.
Good stuff. Well, thank you, Rudyard, so much, dude.
Take
care.
It's a pleasure.
Till next time.
Bye.
Bye. All right, that was Rudyard Lynch from What a Falsist. Legend, dude. I mean, like, I think every Zoomer, any Zoomer that's like politically adjacent has seen his work at some point. He's just, yeah, he's a titan for Zoomers. That was great. Terrifying. He didn't tamper any fears, really. He just explained why those fears are valid. And it's true. We have to confront this. I mean, we have to acknowledge the reality that, like, there's a sizable chunk of the country that wants to kill, like, white Christian conservatives purely for being white Christian conservatives. There's nothing more to it. And that is a absolutely harrowing reality. And the Trump administration, that's the off-ramp, is them cracking down. We discussed this at length on Timcast IRL. Just hit Phil up if you want him to explain it to you. He's really good at that sort of stuff. So with that, I want to thank you guys for watching. I want to thank you guys. It'd been 2 weeks with the obviously with the tragedy with Charlie Kirk. We needed to change up the week schedule, but yeah, typically I will be taking over for Thursdays for the morning show. So you guys are stuck with me on Thursdays if you want your Timcast news. But it is what it is. I appreciate you guys watching. If you're still around, we'll be back tonight for Timcast IRL at 8 p.m. You can find me on Twitter, or X rather, and Instagram at Real Tate Brown. Come follow me there. And yeah, we'll see you guys tonight.